Guys, what was the worst experience you had in a hospital? They forgot the anesthesia. I went into the hospital for what was supposed to be a routine appendectomy. I was nervous but reassured by the staff that it was a simple procedure and I'd be out in a couple of days. Everything seemed fine until they wheeled me into the operating room. I remember the cold metal of the table and the bright lights, and then nothing, except suddenly I was awake. Not awake as in recovery room awake. I mean during the operation. I could hear the doctors talking, feel the scalpel slicing into me, the pressure, the pain. I couldn't move. I couldn't scream. My brain was screaming, but my body was paralyzed. Turns out they had failed to administer the anesthesia properly, but gave me the paralytic. I was fully aware for the first few minutes of surgery, experiencing the worst pain I've ever felt before they noticed something was wrong with my vitals and finally knocked me out. Afterwards, I tried to tell the nurses and doctors what had happened, and most of them didn't believe me. I went home traumatized. I still have nightmares about it. It's called anesthesia awareness, and it's rare, but it's real. I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. The nurse left a sponge inside me. About 3 years ago, I went to the hospital for a C-section. The surgery went smoothly, or so I thought. The baby was healthy, I was exhausted but happy, and after a few days I went home. But about a week later, I started getting the worst abdominal pain I've ever felt in my life. It felt like my insides were rotting. At first, the doctor told me it was normal post-surgery discomfort. Then the pain got so bad I couldn't walk. I went back to the ER, and after a lot of waiting, tests, and dismissive comment from nurses, they finally did a CT scan. They had left a surgical sponge inside me, a full-size sponge. It had started to cause a serious infection, and I had to go in for emergency surgery to have it removed. I spent another week in the hospital recovering, hooked up to 4 antibiotics, and barely able to move. The worst part? When I brought it up to the hospital's administration, they treated it like a paperwork error. No epalegi, no accountability. Just a wall of legal speak, and we'll look into it. I had to get a lawyer involved, but I still wake up some nights panicking, feeling like there's something still left inside me. They forgot I was awake during surgery. A few years ago, I had to go in for what was supposed to be a routine surgery, removing a benign tumor from my leg. I was nervous, but the doctor reassured me it would be quick, painless, and I'd be out the same day. What they didn't know, and what I didn't realize until it was too late, was that the anesthesia didn't work properly on me. I was completely paralyzed, unable to move or speak, but I was fully awake. I could feel every slice, every tug, every pull of the skin and muscle. I remember the sound of the scalpel scraping bone. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. My body was unresponsive, trapped in a nightmare. I heard the surgeons talking casually about lunch while they worked on me. One of them even said something like, "This one's taking longer than I thought. My wife's gonna kill me." I tried to blink, anything to let them know I was still conscious. But my eyelids wouldn't move. I started to panic. My heart rate spiked so high it finally set off an alarm. That's when the anesthesiologist rushed over and started frantically checking my vitals. I heard someone say, "He's waking up." No, I was already awake. I had been the entire time. They knocked me out with something stronger, and I blacked out. After the surgery, I told the nurses what happened. They brushed it off as a bad reaction to the anesthesia. That's not uncommon. One said like it was no big deal. But it was. It left me with trauma so deep I couldn't go near a hospital for 2 years without breaking into a cold sweat. To this day, I wonder how often this happens to people who can't speak up, who are awake in their own private hell while someone cuts into them, thinking they're asleep. They left me bleeding for hours. When I was 19, I went to the ER after a skateboarding accident that left my leg torn open from the knee to the ankle. It was bad, bone deep in places with blood soaking through my jeans. I got a ride from a friend, still dizzy and in shock, assuming I'd be seen immediately. But the nightmare started the moment I arrived. The waiting room was packed, but I was triaged fairly quickly. A nurse took one look at my leg and said, "You're lucky it's not arterial." She wrapped it in gauze, handed me an ice pack, and told me to wait until a doctor was available. I sat in that chair for nearly 5 hours. During that time, the blood soaked through every bandage they gave me. I could feel it pooling in my shoe, dripping onto the hospital floor. I told the staff 3 times that the pain was unbearable, that I was getting dizzy. One nurse shrugged and said, "Sorry, sweetie. We're doing the best we can." No one rewrapped it. No one even looked at it again. At some point, I passed out. I don't know if it was from blood loss or sheer exhaustion, but when I woke up, I was in a hallway, not the waiting room. I was on a stretcher, but no one was around. I could hear beeping machines, muffled voices behind closed doors, and the buzzing fluorescent lights overhead. My leg felt like it was on fire. Eventually, a young doctor, maybe a resident, came by and looked horrified. He muttered something about, "Who left this kid like this?" and immediately started prepping to clean and stitch the wound. That's when I saw the infection. My leg had started to swell. The edges of the wound were red and angry, and there was yellowish fluid leaking through the bandage. They had to scrub the whole thing down without anesthesia because they said it was too late to wait. I screamed the entire time. I felt every stitch. When I asked about painkillers afterward, they told me they'd give me some ibuprofen and to take it easy. I didn't even get antibiotics until I returned 2 days later because the swelling got worse. The worst part? They tried to blame me. They said I waited too long to come in, even though I'd been sitting in their ER for 5 hours bleeding out while they gave priority to people with less graphic injuries. I ended up needing a skin graft and months of rehab just to walk properly again. To this day, I have a huge scar down my leg. Not just physical, but emotional too. I now avoid hospitals at all costs. I would rather stitch myself up at home than go back into that place where no one cared if I was bleeding or screaming or slowly slipping away. They left the scissors inside me. I had abdominal surgery when I was 25 due to recurring ovarian cysts. It was supposed to be routine, laparoscopic, in and out in a day, 2 small incisions, nothing major. The surgeon was experienced, and I trusted the hospital. But from the moment I woke up from anesthesia, I knew something was wrong. I was in agony. Not just the dull ache they warned me about, but sharp, stabbing pain every time I breathed or moved. I told the nurse something didn't feel right. She gave me more morphine and said I was just being sensitive to post-op pain. I've broken bones. I've had dental surgery. This was not normal. They discharged me that evening. I couldn't stand up straight. I vomited twice in the parking lot. My boyfriend had to carry me up the stairs at home. That night, I had a fever of 102, chills, and I was crying from the pain. We called the hospital. They said to take Tylenol and rest. By day 3, I couldn't move. My stomach was swollen, hard to the touch, and I felt like I was dying. We went back to the ER, the same hospital, a different doctor this time, who immediately ordered an X-ray and CT scan. When he came back with the results, his face was pale. There was a pair of surgical scissors inside me. They'd been left during the procedure, right near my lower intestine. The edges had already started causing internal bleeding and a localized infection. I had to be rushed into emergency surgery to remove them. I spent a week in the ICU with a tube in my nose, a catheter, and round-the-clock antibiotics. The original surgeon tried to deny it at first, said it was impossible, and maybe the image was a reflection or mistake. But the scissors had a serial number. They were hospital property. There was no denying it. I ended up suing the hospital. They settled quietly, and I signed an NDA. So technically, I'm not even supposed to be telling you this. But honestly, I don't care anymore. Every time I feel a weird pain in my body now, I spiral into panic. I get flashbacks. I have nightmares where I wake up on the table and can't move while they operate on me. The compensation money didn't undo the trauma. It didn't rebuild the trust. A hospital that almost killed me tried to pretend it was my imagination. That's the part that still makes me furious. I woke up during surgery. I was 19 and needed my wisdom teeth removed. Pretty basic stuff, right? Except mine were impacted and growing sideways under the gums, which meant I needed general anesthesia. I wasn't nervous, just wanted over with. I signed all the papers, got to 4, counted backward from 10, and blacked out. Except, I didn't stay out. At some point during the procedure, I started to regain consciousness. Not fully awake, but just enough to know something was wrong. I couldn't move, couldn't open my eyes, couldn't speak, but I could feel. I felt pressure, cutting, and the terrifying grind of bone. I felt metal scraping against my jaw, and I heard muffled voices. One of them joking about lunch, another saying something about too much bleeding, but no one noticed I was awake. I was completely paralyzed, trapped in my own body, screaming internally while they kept working. It was like being buried alive under your own skin. I don't know how long it lasted, maybe 5 minutes, maybe 10. But then something clicked and I was out cold again. When I woke up in recovery, I started crying immediately. Not because of the pain, but because I remembered vividly. Every second, my hands were shaking, my heart was pounding. I told the nurse what happened, and she gave me a strange look and said, "That's not possible, sweetie. You were fully under." But it was possible. It's called anesthesia awareness. It's rare, but it happens. And it happened to me. For months after, I had panic attacks every time I had to lie back in a dentist chair. I couldn't watch medical shows anymore. I started waking up gasping from nightmares where I couldn't move while people cut me open. I never sued the clinic. I didn't know how, and part of me was convinced no one would believe me. But to this day, I carry that trauma like a second skin. People think going under is like sleep, but when it goes wrong, it's more like being buried alive, while people smile and chat above your coffin. They amputated the wrong leg. I'm not joking. They literally amputated the wrong leg. It happened to my uncle, but I was the one who had to deal with the fallout because I was his medical power of attorney. He's an older guy, mid-60s, diabetic, not great at keeping up with his health. One day, he got a really bad infection in his right foot, and it spread quickly. The doctors told us the leg had to come off from just above the knee to save his life. He agreed, reluctantly. We signed everything. All the paperwork clearly stated, right leg. The surgery happened early in the morning. I was waiting in the hospital room when the doctor came in post-op, smiling like he'd done a great job. Everything went well, he said. We successfully removed the left leg. I blinked. Sorry, did you mean right leg? He paused. His face dropped. Let me check the chart. I'm not exaggerating when I say that I felt like the air was sucked out of the room. 10 minutes later, the head of the department came in, white as a sheet, and admitted it. They had amputated the wrong leg. My uncle was still groggy from anesthesia when we told him. At first, he thought it was a bad joke. Then, when he realized we were serious, he started screaming. I've never heard a sound like that in my life. The hospital panicked. They put him under again that same day and amputated the correct leg. So, when he woke up, he had no legs at all. Both gone. All because of a clerical error and an overworked surgical team that didn't double-check their prep. They tried to settle with us quietly. A huge sum of money, NDA, the whole deal. My uncle refused. He wanted the world to know. There were news stories, investigations. People were fired, policies were changed, but none of it gave him back what they stole. He spiraled into depression, spent 6 months in a rehab facility, and hasn't really been the same since. Every time I see a hospital bed now, I feel sick. I've got anxiety about any medical procedure, no matter how small. Because now I know hospitals are human, and humans make devastating mistakes. I accidentally flashed the whole ICU. Okay, so this happened about 2 years ago, and I still can't look my mom's nurse in the eye. My mom had a minor heart procedure and was recovering in the ICU. Not critical, just observation. I flew in from out of town to help, and I've been crashing at the hospital for like 2 nights straight. Barely sleeping, totally exhausted, and wearing the same sweatpants and hoodie combo for way too long. On the 3rd morning, I woke up super early in the hospital lounge, which, by the way, is just a fancy name for a room with chairs that hurt your spine. I needed a shower and change, but my stuff was in my mom's room. She was asleep, so I figured I'd quietly sneak in, grab my bag, and bounce. Here's where I messed up. I was wearing basketball shorts under my sweatpants the night before, but I forgot that I had taken the shorts off to sleep more comfortably. So I walk into her ICU room, half asleep, still in my hoodie and sweatpants, and I feel this itch on my thigh. I go to scratch it and yank the waistband of my sweatpants down just slightly to get better access, you know? Except there's nothing under them. And right at that exact moment, the nurse comes in with 2 interns and a tray of meds. And there I am, full moon rising, scratching myself like a caveman, in the middle of a sterile ICU room. Everyone freezes. My mom wakes up, groggy and confused. The nurse just goes, "Sir?" And I panic. I yank the sweatpants back up so hard I practically gave myself a wedgie and yell, "Sorry." I thought I had shorts, which, frankly, makes it sound worse. The interns are just trying not to laugh. One of them snorted. I literally ran out of the room and hid in the stairwell for 20 minutes. When I came back, no one mentioned it. Ever. Not the nurse, not my mom, not even the interns. It was like it never happened, but you could feel the tension in the air every time I walked in. To this day, my mom occasionally says, "Remember when you came to help me in the hospital?" And I say no before she can finish. The trauma is real. What about you? Let me know your own experiences in the comments.